everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. This is John LaFront, and we have a great episode for you today. My wife Ashley is going to be joining me in a minute, and we are going to be talking about one of our favorite movies as it relates to family systems, and just also happens to be Disney, and that is the movie Encanto. And I don't think a lot of people realize that this movie is actually about family trauma, generational pain, emotional roles, and what happens when an entire family system is built around protecting an unhealed wound. At the beginning of Encanto, we learn that the Madrigal family was born out of deep, deep trauma. Abuela, Alma is her name. She loses her husband violently while fleeing danger with triplets. In her darkest, most devastating moment, a miracle appears, a magical candle that creates protection, provision, and a magical home, the casita. The miracle becomes the center of the family. But as the family grows, every child receives a magical gift, and each gift becomes both a blessing, but also a family expectation. Their powers are not simply personal, they exist to serve the family and also the community. And the message is very clear in the movie. Your value comes from what you contribute, whether that's strength or beauty, healing, knowledge, perfection, productivity. Every person in the family has a role. Everyone shines. Everyone helps uphold the miracle. Everyone except Mirabel. And when Mirabel comes of age, she receives no magical gift. She becomes the only family member without an assigned role. And that leaves her feeling unseen and inadequate and desperate to find where she belongs in this family. Yet strangely, she also becomes the one person that's capable of seeing what no one else can. That the family and the casita is cracking. The house literally begins breaking. The magic is weakening. The family is struggling beneath impossible expectations, but no one wants to talk about it, especially Abuela. So when Mirabel notices the cracks, she tries her best to warn the family because she loves them. But instead of listening, what do? They dismiss her. They minimize her. They blame her. They tell her that nothing is wrong, that the system must stay intact. And as Mirabel begins investigating, she discovers hidden pain beneath every family member's role. Louisa is the strong one, but she's collapsing under pressure. Isabella is the perfect one, and she feels completely trapped. Bruno, the estranged uncle, becomes the family outcast. Why? Because he told uncomfortable truths. And eventually Mirabel realizes the miracle isn't dying because someone failed. It's dying because the family was built around unhealed trauma and impossible expectations. So what happens? The house finally collapses. The illusion shatters, and Abuela and Mirabel are forced to confront the truth. The family never healed the wound that started it all. Only after grief, honesty, accountability, and rebuilding together does the family finally begin healing. And at the end of the movie, Mirabel, the one who seemed giftless at the beginning, turns out to be the person who saves the family. Not through magic, through truth. It's one of our favorite movies, and we're excited to share some of our thoughts with you. And so without further ado, let's jump right into it. Hello, everyone. I am so excited for this episode. I just made Ashley watch the whole movie again.
Which I love to do, so it was no big deal.
It is one of our favorites, and this is probably like 2 years overdue to have this
We should
conversation.
have started with this episode.
I know, because it's like so foundational.
Yeah.
A lot of girls have Disney princesses that they relate to, and we went to Disney World for spring break like 4 years ago, and I remember being so stoked that Mirabel was at Epcot because I'm like, that's your princess, Ash. Because it just
The first time I ever identified with a Disney
Yeah.
princess, I was like, oh, she's my girl.
Yeah. So it is like, I don't know, strangely familiar the movie is to Ashley's life and to everything that we've kind of gone through with estrangement and seeing truths and trying to help the cracks in the house and all of those types of things. But I think that the key as we start this discussion is that this isn't a retelling of Ashley's story per se, but it's identifying the parallels, the family system truths that are more universal. And I think a lot of people that are in this community is because they have some level of family dysfunction. Everyone has an element of family dysfunction. Some, it just gets out of control. And that's why this movie even, I think, was created. There's elements of truth that are like completely infused in the whole storyline. So
and let me just say, I mean, we should probably have started with this too, but I think Encanto is like the most brilliant movie ever created on family systems.
yeah.
It is just so insightful. And I'm always like, how do the creators of Disney know all of this?
Yeah.
They really are so intuitive, and they knew these things before, far before we did, right? But I guess it just takes people going through it and identifying it. And maybe it was Encanto was their way of expressing, the truths that they then saw and felt.
Well, and even Lin-Manuel Miranda,
Yeah.
just, I mean, obviously we all love Hamilton, and he wrote those lyrics, but the lyrics to this musical as well, there's just so many truth bombs
Yeah.
that are like so intricately woven
So good.
into it. And, they're the songs that everyone was rocking out to, like, I don't know how many years ago it was, but the We Don't Talk About Bruno, and it's just has catchy melodies, but the truth that is in those is just so insanely profound. But
Yeah.
I thought, let's go. There's a lot of different ways we could skin this cat, and we're going to kind of see where it goes. We have a rough outline of where we want to take it, but I wanted to open up first to let Ashley kind of identify why does this story resonate with her? A lot of you know more of her story, but just you had seen this show before, and then all of a sudden your eyes were open to, oh, this story's about me or our life. So what was it about it that really just all of a sudden hit you?
I think I really identified with Mirabel's character in that in my family, I was nothing special. I wasn't the smart one. I was not the pretty one. I was not the skinny one. I was not like, I don't know. I wasn't any of the things that my family really valued. My mom and I were really close, and she valued things about me, but nobody else did really. And I'm grateful for that. But as far as contributing to the family and feeling like I had strengths there, I didn't. I was very plain in that regard. And it's like, they loved me, but I also just kind of existed to validate all the ways that they were exceptional. I wasn't really myself seen as exceptional. I was there to validate their exceptionalism. And I really kind of accepted that of just like, and I was happy to do it.
Well, and it's Ashley's the youngest of 7 kids. And so looking at Mirabel in this story, she's kind of this youngest transitional figure between generations, really. And because she has these younger kids that are coming up, but very observant person and very loving, loves her family, thinks that is her gift, is just that she comes from an amazing family. And she's so grateful that she can be around all of them, right?
Yeah.
And that was kind of the way
be
you
one
felt.
Of them.
Yeah.
Yes. Even though I didn't necessarily bring a lot, I got to be one of them. And that gave me a lot of, validation and purpose when I was younger. The other thing that I really identified with is having a Bruno type family member. I have a Bruno type family member. And, I would just sit and wonder, why aren't we helping this person more? Or the help we're giving, I could see was not the right kind of help, because at the end of the day, nobody wanted to ask why he was experiencing what he was experiencing, or what the root of it was, what pain he was acting from. It was just like, oh, he's just a screw up and he just isn't disciplined enough to get it right. And I knew that that was wrong, but I also didn't know why. And so I just kind of observed that of just like, okay, I'm not particularly gifted. I'm also not the Bruno who's kind of been banished from the family because of choices and who he was. And so, yeah, I just became an observer. And I think that's what Mirabel is best at the beginning, in the
Well,
beginning.
and I think the interesting thing, this is more my lens, but I think that your role in your family has transitioned from a Mirabel character into Bruno within the family circle because you're the one that they have ostracized, they tell stories about to try and keep the narrative pure within the system.
Mm-hmm.
And that was what happened to Bruno too, right? It wasn't that Bruno himself was bad or that what his gift was,
Yeah.
was evil. It was just something that made them so horribly uncomfortable that it was, we don't talk about it.
Yeah.
And because he had no other choice but to talk about it, because that was his gift, he was ostracized. So
Yeah.
you've just had a very interesting story arc in your family because you went from kind of that beginning Mirabel character, of kind of there to support everyone and to love
Mm-hmm.
everyone and be this peacemaker into the villain, kind of in the story. But I think the reason for that is kind of like at the heart of this story is that family trauma trauma itself becomes the family culture,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's interesting because when you watch the whole movie, you don't really learn about the trauma like in its purest form until the very end of the movie
Yeah.
because the grandmother, has done such a good job of retelling history
Mm-hmm.
through a different lens. But I thought we could also just talk about that too, of like going through just what happens when families are built, from a place of trauma.
Well, I think it just becomes a family system that's full of anxiety. They're anxiety-ridden family systems. And what's happening is the family, and often the head of the family, they have experienced trauma. And it is interesting that, Abuela loses her husband, has 3 babies. That's very, very traumatic. But then she's given this gift and she feels like I was given a second chance. And this is totally relatable. So there's no blame, but instead of just being grateful for the gift, it almost turns into anxiety of like, how do I keep the gift? How do I keep it? And that becomes the emotional foundation of the family system is anxiety with fear of how do I keep and maintain this good thing that I
Mhm.
maybe was lost from me or I've never had and suddenly got. Um, and so everybody is this family system is controlled then to kind of get everyone to play their part. And that's why you get somebody like Bruno who takes on the shame. All the shame is put on Bruno. But then you have, the sister that is the strong one, and she bears a lot of burden by being the strong one, and she can lift and bear anything and not break. And that character, what's her name? Louisa?
Yeah.
Louisa is so fascinating to me because my oldest sister is that character. She, feels like I'm strong enough to do anything. And she's taken on so much burden that it has literally broken her.
Well, and it's interesting because, with the family gifts, the way Abuela talks about these gifts is that is what makes the family proud. That is what is
Mm-hmm.
so that, and when I watched your family with your sister praise her for basically sacrificing herself
Mm-hmm.
by being the strong one,
Yeah.
that was so idolized and praised. But
Mm-hmm.
then deep down, she was ready
It
to
was killing
break,
her.
and
Yeah.
so every member of the family has their roles. and they each play a different part, but in these kind of dysfunctional or like unhealthy family systems, those quote unquote gifts, which actually aren't gifts, they're just titles or roles that a
Mhm.
family has, they're viewed as like their strength. And that's where Ashley, her strength and her family and her parents said it all the time, and they've said it many times over the last 3.5 years. You used to be the peacemaker or the peacekeeper. You know, what
Well,
happened to our
yeah.
Ashley? That was the role. And
They
they
say
kept,
peacemaker.
yeah, but
They don't know
they don't know
peacekeeper.
it.
But that or sweet. I was always the sweet
You
one.
were so sweet. And it was
Yeah.
like, so they celebrated that constantly with you because they wanted you to play that role.
Yeah.
And when you finally started stepping out of that role, that was when everything started fracturing. The cracks in the house began to expose because all of a sudden you were deviating from the controlled system and environment. And
Well,
so,
I saw the cracks, but it wasn't until, yeah, I started
speaking
speaking
about them,
truth
yeah.
that they started seeing the cracks and feeling them. And then it was like, I love it. At one point, Mirabel, she's kind of on this search for like, why is the house crumbling? She's the only one that can see the cracks for a long time. And I think that's part of her gift, right? But she doesn't realize it. And so she's trying to tell everybody, and they're like, what are you talking about? We don't see cracks. And, she's seeing them, and then more people are admitting that they're seeing them. And so she kind of becomes investigator. And the
Well, and then she
closer she
even hears
gets,
that Abuela sees the cracks. In a private moment, she's there hiding and she hears Abuela praying, asking and pleading for help, and she's admitting that there are cracks.
yeah,
But to the public and to the family, we've never been stronger. The magic has never been more powerful. It's this whole facade where deep down the
yeah.
cracks are starting to crumble.
And
Yeah.
the closer Mirabel gets to the truth, or
Yeah.
just like the more she pushes everyone to see it, there's a moment where Abuela just like screams at her and she's like, Mirabella, stop, And again, that control rears its ugly head because she does not want Mirabel to continue to talk about and expose what is happening actually, but it's like the talking about it makes it so much more real. If we don't talk about it, maybe we can pretend that it's not happening and that it'll just go away.
Yeah.
But the talking about it makes us realize this is real and maybe it's not going to go away. And that's terrifying for an anxiety-ridden family system that's learned to project different emotions onto different people in order to deny reality and cope. So,
Well, and the other interesting thing, it's very clear that Abuela loves her family. She's doing
yeah.
all of this. The motive is good,
Uh-huh.
but it wreaks havoc with each generation. Abuela did the best she could with the information that she had, but she didn't realize that she built this whole system around control, and it was all fear-based. And so then, therefore, the thing that was heartbreaking about it through most of the movie was that love was very transactional, right?
Mhm.
We love you as long as you stay within your assigned role. If you step outside of the assigned role, then we withdraw and withhold the love. And you saw that dynamic between Abuela and Mirabel,
Well,
is
and
that
you
as she was
see,
growing and trying to differentiate and trying to find herself, Abuela did not like that. And then her anger towards Mirabel got louder and louder because it was exposing Abuela's like inner shame,
yeah.
that was there.
Well, and you see that truly every person gets their identity and value, value. Yeah, value. I'm going to say valuation. Identity and value from their gift. They think it's their gift that makes them special and important rather than just their inherent self-worth because of just who they are as an individual. And we see that all the time too. And that's why for so long I did play the role as the sweet one, because it is the only thing that I was capable of that got me praise and validation, which I was desperate for. And so that's the role I played because it's the only thing that I was ever validated for. So I became it. And so it was so painful when my mom over and over and over would say, what happened? You've always been so sweet. And now, and I remember before I really understood all this, I would feel infuriated because I'm like, I want to be sweet. I'm trying to be nice, but I also feel like I have to tell the truth. And like, why won't you let me do both?
Yeah.
I was not allowed. Being the sweet one came with never saying anything that would make anybody uncomfortable ever. And I grew enough to realize I can't do that anymore. But once I started to really understand family systems, I was like, oh, I was really conditioned to be that. That's why I was only praised and validated when I was that.
Yeah.
And
Well,
I
and with
was desperate for that love. That's the way I could get love.
yeah. Yeah. And it became transactional. And so you
Mm-hmm.
learned that
Mm-hmm.
behavior. In family systems theory too, they often talk about homeostasis, right? And that is the whole system functioning together as like this unit. There was a period in the movie where Abuela has everybody at dinner, and she's again talking about how strong the family is. And they even did like a family chant. The Madrigal is something something. And it
Yeah.
was this family chant that they all did together, and they all worked together in one block. But what you learn about homeostasis, and when somebody like the scapegoat or truth teller steps forward and kind of grows into that role, the system does view that as a threat to the system. Just like any other threat in nature, that is why estrangement exists,
Mm-hmm.
really, is because you have to completely out the threat in
Mm-hmm.
order to keep the homeostasis continuing to go.
Yeah.
And that doesn't allow for individuality, differentiation, or different strengths, really, other than, again, the ones that the system has given. And I think that it's also interesting that, like, Abuela is the one that gave the gifts to each of these individuals, right? Or like saw them and was kind of like, this is your role in the family. And generational patterns, happen that way because it's like this learned behavior that has to pass down from generation to generation,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. Well, and even, I mean, I don't know. I didn't necessarily get that Abuela gives them. I think that they just, with their personalities, do come certain gifts. So she would see them and they would capitalize on them and use them
Yeah,
to,
to protect the family.
yes, yes. And so,
Because it was that their gifts, she said, were for the family and for the
yes.
community.
Uh-huh.
And by the community, it meant like, this is how you represent the family to the community so that
Yeah.
we look perfect and that
Well,
we
and
can
that's
be
the other
these,
thing. You see, like a lot of narcissistic family systems, they have these egos of like, we're extra special,
Mhm.
and so we need to be seen as extra special because we are extra special. And often they will be in service of others, but for the purpose of kind of being like top of the ladder socially and in society. And, that can get distorted really quickly because service-oriented people, some of them do it just because they're pure and they want to serve others, and other people do it for the validation to come that gets brought back to them. They do it for the praise they receive, not just to serve others. And so there are strings attached and they need that validation back. And that's kind of the interesting thing, again, about high profile family systems. They often, pretend good and will do good, but they need that validation and that status in society to feel good about themselves. And that, so you see Abuela like, oh, we're serving everyone. The family and community needs us. But how much of it over time just kind of was distorted and to this, well, like we're extra special and we have to keep being extra special. And there's probably a little bit of both in there, honestly.
Yeah. So let's just kind of do some quick rundowns, I guess, of each of the characters, right? So we already have talked a pretty significant amount about Mirabel. So she's the truth teller and the scapegoat. We've also talked about Bruno and the reason why we don't talk about Bruno. The thing that's just interesting and why we relate to it is he is the estranged scapegoat.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of interesting. I don't know. It's probably one of the first stories that I can recall where like estrangement within a family system is shown in a Disney film, of that nature where but he's living within the walls.
Yeah.
And the other thing that's interesting about him too is that he was doing it all out of love. Like he estranged himself out of love. And behind the walls, there's a portion there where Mirabel sees that he has been patching cracks all over the place. So even though he's gone and he felt like he needed to, in order for the system to keep running, he behind the scenes was trying to still keep it together in his own way. And again, it was all out of love for his family. He really, really loved them. But yet they also had to turn him into a villain because they didn't want the cracks to be exposed. Well, and I don't think we've talked about this. So where the estrangement happened, Bruno has a gift, and that gift is he is able to have visions. And the visions are kind of truth of where these things are going. And the last vision that he has that the family recognizes was of the house, and the house had completely cracked. And then the one
crumbling.
person in front of the house was Mirabel. And once everyone saw that just simply the house cracked, they didn't even think of Mirabel, I don't think.
Yeah.
But it was the house cracking was the thing that terrified all of them. That was what exiled him. It was like, you can't talk about the cracks. And he had to vanish.
And even before then, it's interesting because he saw a vision of whose fish? Louisa's fish, or no, not the weather one.
Yeah, I don't remember her name.
We don't know her name. Anyway, she has a fish, and she's like, Bruno sees a vision, and he said, my fish died, and the next day, it's dead. And so the story is Bruno's vision caused my fish to die, not Bruno saw that my fish was going to die. It's, Bruno's vision caused it. So let's hide Bruno. And I just think that's
a good,
so,
like, subtle difference for sure.
Yeah. So they, and just the way the family, one person in the family chooses to see something and then retell it to everybody else, it distorts everything very successfully, right? So they quickly learn to fear Bruno because that's how it's being represented. It's being misrepresented, but in a way that nobody quite catches on.
Yeah.
And so you can see how easily these things get off track and the truth is distorted.
Well, and this is where just family folklore starts to exist, where there's fear, distortion, myths, and there's usually somebody that's controlling the narrative.
Yes.
And it's the person that is wanting to control the family. So even if your family isn't at the level of dysfunction as the Madrigals or Ashley's family, there still are things that you could maybe scratch your head and go, why aren't we talking about this family member? Or why have we estranged ourselves from this family member? There's usually a lot of insights into why that exists if you get curious with it.
Well, and I just want to say, you and I see the dynamic with Mirabel and Bruno a little bit differently. And I think that's good because we have different perspectives. I see myself more as Mirabel. I actually don't identify with Bruno almost at all because I see him in my brother so much, who started
but more of like
drugs.
the futuristic, like,
but
you saw the cracks before anyone else did. You were talking about the cracks before anyone else did, and it was this like self-fulfilling prophecy.
But they are scared of Mirabel and they're trying to quiet her. But
more so because of her curiosity in Bruno.
But it's kind of the same. Like, Mirabel could have moved out of the house and been like, whatever. But like, I don't know. I just see the roles mirror each other.
Yeah.
They do. Bruno and Mirabel, they both exist. I just feel like Mirabel also, when you have a family member who reacts like Bruno and takes all that pain and then starts coping through different, substances or mechanisms, and they fall victim to then that narrative of like, oh, what's wrong with them? They're defective. It's like when you come after that, okay, you learn that doesn't work, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm always so grateful that I'm the youngest of 7 children because I always say I have 6 examples of what did not work, and this was kind of the last option. But because I had siblings, and even more than one, that chose coping mechanisms that shunned them hardcore.
Or were assigned those coping mechanisms, right? Or those strengths, right?
Well, they just, I mean, you're not,
Well, I'm thinking of
because they're
like
taking the
Louisa.
shame
She
on.
was the parentified child.
Yeah,
That
well,
was a role
yes.
that was given to her too.
Yes, that's
It
true. I
was,
guess I'm thinking like drug addiction.
yeah, yeah,
That
yeah.
choice was made, but it's because the anxiety was placed on
Yeah,
the scapegoat at that time. And
because they were identified as the
yes,
scapegoat. Yeah.
yes. And so the shame is being pushed to this child. The pride is being pushed onto the golden child.
Mm-hmm.
And so that anxiety that the scapegoat receives often is what turns them to substances for addiction. I just was able to see that. And I think so was Mirabel. So you kind of stay in this place of like, okay, I'm not going to sink into the walls like Bruno, but I'm not gifted the way everybody else is to lean into this gift that is valued in my family. So I'll just stay and kind of try to be a part and love everyone and support everyone. And I'm okay to do that. Like that, even though right now we don't have a lot to do with my family, I don't see us as Bruno characters where we're like that. We're still, they talk about us, I'm pretty sure, at every family gathering, like we are very talked about
But in the
and
way
very, very,
of don't talk about them, kind of,
well,
because
they don't
they
want
put
to
so much
know.
fear because they
Yes.
don't want anyone else to see. So they have to villainize us
Yes.
and tell the stories and the folklore
That's true.
and all those things. That's why I'm saying it's an evolution
Yeah.
that we're now in kind of this Bruno phase. And not exactly, like
Yeah.
it's not verbatim, but we have evolved into now we are the estranged scapegoat that is now being talked about and we're part of the family folklore. But so then the other child is Louisa, and we've talked briefly about her, but she's the parentified child, right? So she said in there one line, I'm pretty sure I'm worthless if I can't be of service. That was in her strong song. But, and that song is basically a therapy session with Louisa of understanding her inner psyche of what she is carrying for everyone and her methodology behind and strategies for just survival.
I actually, when I clued into the fact that Encanto was about family systems and how deeply relatable it was to me, the song, Louisa's song, what's it called? It's the one about just being strong. The drip, drip, drip that'll never stop. Anyway, I sobbed. I cried every time I heard that song, and then I would play it in my car and I'd just cry for my oldest sister, who is this. Suddenly I felt what I know she's felt she's 16 years older than I am. So, for 50 something years, almost 60 years. And that pressure to carry it all and be of service and take on the burdens and help it made me weep. And she's one of the most severe toward us right now, but because I kind of understand, and I understand the fear, the absolute terror that drives her, I accept it. Like it's okay. I'm not angry with her. I love her and I see the pain and terror that drives her. And I see the way she has self-sacrificed for the betterment in her mind of everybody. And I just see that it didn't actually work and it didn't help everybody. Because she does that, she also expects everyone else to do that to an extent. And so she's very, very mad at us that we are going another direction and trying to just talk about the truth. But
well, and she feels responsible.
Yeah.
For this crack, kind of within the system.
There's no question she takes on a lot. But you know what? Jesus is going to make it all right one day.
Yep.
And when that day comes, I will be absolutely overjoyed.
So one of the other characters that I want to talk about is Isabella. And it is fascinating when we were watching it this time. Mirabel and Isabella totally clash. And Isabella represents the golden child, right? And it's all the flowers and she has to just be perfect and she's beautiful and she's the one that's going to marry the big hunk from the town and all these things. But when I look at Ashley and her relationships with her siblings, the ones that she clashed with the most were the golden child people, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
So how does
Yeah.
that dynamic, when you watched it this time, how did that play into your life and childhood as well?
I don't know. I don't really know the answer to that question. I think those golden children, it's interesting. With my family, there's 7 kids, and the patterns kind of repeat. There's the oldest child that took on a lot of the responsibility, but after that, you kind of have golden child, scapegoat, golden child, scapegoat, golden child, scapegoat. And it went, so there's a girl that's the oldest, and then 2 more girls. So golden child girl, scapegoat girl, then 2 boys, golden child boy, scapegoat boy, then 2 girls, golden child girl, scapegoat girl. Now that's interesting because the sister just older than I am, there are siblings in my family who maybe would have called me the golden child, but only for my mom, never for my dad, who is the kingpin. So the golden children for my dad are the ones that are much more like him. They were the more beautiful, the more
seemingly
talented, always as girls, always skinnier when we were younger. And so, yeah, just kind of interesting. But it's like those golden children also played off of the younger sibling beneath them, like not being nearly what they were. And each of those sets of 3, the golden child in the set would, use the child under them as kind of their springboard to make themselves look better.
Yeah.
And so that happened.
Well, and you've just had a lot of
different...
trauma from siblings that are golden children above you, right?
Yeah.
That would tell you in childhood, I just can tell that you're not going to be a good kisser, for example. And that stayed with you.
Elementary school.
But it stayed with you for years. Like you had trauma because they were projecting all of these things
and like, don't wear
you.
my clothes, you make them look ugly.
Yeah.
I mean, and look, those are kind of, I think a lot of people have stories like that. Like it's normal for older siblings to be cruel and say mean things to their younger siblings. But I don't know, in this particular regard, it just seems like it was deeper and it kind of never ended. Like people didn't grow up and grow out of their roles as childhood immature roles. They stayed. It's like the people grew older and their bully tactics became more sophisticated, but it was kind of all the same.
Yeah. Well, and I think that it's interesting too. Isabella's the golden child, and at first she looks incredibly narcissistic, and she is. She's very self-absorbed in the movie, but we do discover as the movie goes on that she is trapped, she's exhausted, she's performing this perfection. It's hard to maintain that. She never had permission to be herself because as the golden child, all eyes were on her constantly to be that perfection. So it's not that, again, all of these roles, they are roles that are assigned, and there's elements of unhealthy on all of them. So we can all look at it and go, oh, wouldn't it be nice to be the golden child? Well, the golden child has their massive issues as well,
totally.
That it's like you wouldn't want to trade roles with them.
I am deeply grateful that I was never a golden child.
Yeah.
Because it's really hard to get out of that role when your validation is built on everyone thinks that I'm beautiful and wishes for my life. That's very hard to be a normal person. And again, they go into full protection mode because they don't know how to be anything else but a person that people are jealous of.
Yeah.
And that's you can't make decisions, like everyday decisions where you have to be brave, a decision that's good for you that might cost you something. Those people can't make it because their whole worth is tied up in people kind of like thinking they've got it all and being jealous of them.
Yeah.
And, and it's like they didn't even create that. That's just what was kind of handed to them. And yet they don't know how to get out of it.
Yeah. So it's interesting too. You see, again, the protection that Abuela went through. Part of that was outward facing towards the community. and they needed to be the perfection, the pillars of the community, that everyone could look to their gifts, their skills, whatever. And it's, yesterday was Memorial Day, and we were talking with our kids a lot about family history. We were talking about, and we've decided over the years, we're not going to just tell the rose wonderful stories and only that. There's good stories that are great, but we also want to tell the struggle and the humanness as well, so that we don't get ourselves stuck in this trap of the cracks that are in the system. And we both grew up in an era, I think that families are evolving in that you can't ignore some of these things anymore, and people are becoming educated, and you need to talk about it. But when we were reflecting on families that we have been very close to in the past, and that we, from a distance or even close up, idolized them for their perfection and for their strengths, it is shocking, not shocking. Now I know that it's predictable,
Yeah,
because
it's
all of these
textbook.
patterns are textbook. But how many of their houses, so to speak, have cracked and broken, and some are down to rubble that they're trying to rebuild
Yeah.
because the illusion could not go on indefinitely. Like, it will eventually break because it is not sustainable to have that level of perfection and be the pillars of the community, and to have the family all be in their roles, because we're all human and we're imperfect and we are flawed, and we go through seasons where things are hard and challenging. But just interesting to look back on it, both within our family heritage and family tree, but also in friends and things that we've just seen. Just look back over the last 10, 20 years, and it's I can identify so many families that were like the Madrigal family that eventually cracked. And so I think the way you get over that is, and that you don't ultimately crack and go down to rubble, is to always be very aware of the cracks, so that you're not hiding the instability as you go on. You're
Yeah.
fixing each crack as it appears. But we're talking about the crack. Oh, there was a crack in the foundation.
Totally.
We need to patch this up,
And you're
and we
not
talk
trying to
about it.
pretend that your life is something that it's not.
Yeah.
We are very honest about our life. Most of our community, I think, when you do what we've done and you're open about it, people that know you kind of, it's not the most respectable thing. I will say that, right? We have made a lot of people in our own circles, in our own communities,
Very
uncomfortable.
yeah.
And, that's something we had to grieve. And I particularly really had to wrestle with that. And it's well, this is just the truth. And so I'm just going to embrace it. And there is a lot of freedom in just allowing people to have opinions about you and be wrong about you.
But in reverse, I look at those people that are uncomfortable, and I'm like, I sure wouldn't trade them spots.
No.
I don't want to be in that uncomfortable
No.
place where the truth makes me uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So
And now
as
we
you
surround
heal,
ourselves with people who
Yeah.
value honesty in the way that we value honesty, and don't see us as a problem for stating it and living in the truth.
Well, and so it's interesting that because of that, we have zero regrets in that regard. We're so grateful that we see what we see. One of Mirabel's efforts as the movie progresses and kind of crescendos more to the finale is, there's this point where she reaches out to Abuela and she says, "Open your eyes." And that was a big theme. And what that was this plea to Abuela, and it's a plea that almost every adult child that's kind of in this environment is pleading to their family members or whatever. Please see what this has done, the harm that's there, the cracks that are there. Please see me as an individual, not just one of many people. Please just tell the truth. And the plea is not to be perfect, right? The plea is just to be honest.
Yes.
And that in honesty is where that healing can happen. And she's pleading with it before the house crumbles. Now, the house eventually does actually collapse in the movie. And that's also very symbolic of what often happens. But she was trying her best to keep it and prevent it from collapsing. But that was the plea, is just open your eyes. And that would be the one thing that kind of helps it. But what is the psychological, side of the house collapsing?
I think it's the image. It's and everybody
Well, the
everybody's
illusion of
the
the image,
illusion. Yeah.
Yeah.
And And, I loved when at the end, Mirabel, it's like she gets Abuela to a point where Abuela can see and she's like,
But the only way was because the house broke.
yes. And she said, the house broke because of me. And I love that moment of humility because it is what it takes for the family to rebuild. And then there's, once she's kind of humbled and can see the destruction that she's done, that's when Mirabel can be like, Abuela, no, the house didn't just crumble because of you. You went through this trauma and you created a family by yourself. We're a family because of you. We have the miracle because of you. She then is able to tell her, you are not just your failures. This family is all of your successes, but we do have to address the failure. But let's do it together, And then they go in, and then the community comes in and helps, and everybody is an equal in that moment. And I love it because as in a Christian perspective, when Jesus is asking us to become one, I think that is the most beautiful portrayal of that. The egos are gone. Nobody's better than the other. It's not the madrigals there to serve the community. The madrigals need the community as much as the community needs the madrigals, and they're equals, and they all come with their building tools and they rebuild. And then the magic and the miracle comes back, and the house is able to be better than it ever was. But this time, I think it functions because it's built in wisdom and order, right? Everybody's an equal, and there's no ego attached anymore. So it's like, there's nothing wrong with the magic and the miracle, and it was given, but it was distorted out of fear of trying to keep it. And like, we're the only ones that have it. And it had to get to the point where there was humility, and the foundation of equality and unity and togetherness was there for it to be infused back in. And I just think it's really so beautiful. But any family system that needs to heal, that's going to heal, you either have to have somebody that breaks off and just like starts anew. But like, if it's in my case, for example, I really feel like there are certain individuals that if it's going to heal the way that it can powerfully heal, they need to take some responsibility in their part of the destruction. And I could also say those things of like, embrace them and be like, no, there is this good that you did too. And we would not be who we are and where we are today without that bravery and that grit and that, there was a tremendous sacrifice involved in my parents and my dad particularly to give his family a better life than what he came from. And he was able to, but then this fear of being able to keep it, I think, crept in and compounded over the years. And it's like, it's both. He is a person that sacrificed so much, but also got off course a little bit in, how he was keeping it all together. And they both matter, and they both need to be seen.
Yeah. I know it's one of the it's where all of a sudden like the tears come because it's such a powerful moment when Abuela does acknowledge what she had done. And it's what every like estranged adult child, I think, longs for. You long for the day of accountability when your dad can acknowledge what he's done.
But not for my own self,
no,
because
for
I know
her
that,
and for the family healing,
I know
it has
that
to
that's
exist.
where the family will heal.
Yeah.
And so,
So it's a powerful moment. And it's just necessary. But I also loved that the second it happened, Mirabel didn't even like harp on it. It was like, thank you, you've acknowledged it, but hey, we're all in this together. Let's rebuild this foundation together without our egos. And but I loved this part of the last song. They said this was after they had rebuilt the house with the community, but it says, "Home sweet home. I like the new foundation. It isn't perfect. Neither are we." And Abuela says, "That's true. Just one more thing before the celebration." What? "We need a doorknob And so if you remember in the story, everyone gets their doorknob when they kind of come of age and they're able to have their gifts. And Mirabel doesn't get a door and she doesn't get a doorknob. And so then at the end of this, it says, we need a doorknob. And then the whole family says, we made one just for you. We see how bright you burn. We see how brave you've been. Now see yourself in turn. You're the real gift, kid. Let us in. Open your eyes. What do you see? And she says, I see me, all of me. But I just thought like that was.
You're crying and now I'm crying.
I don't cry on the podcast very often.
But you cry in movies all the
I
time.
cry in movies all the time. That's true. Because I don't know, they're able to like just strike such a chord on truths, that like exist in families, and it's such a beautiful like redemptive moment. And I think it's what everyone hopes for. Like we hope for restoration to occur, and like Ashley said, the only way that occurs is like through the healing power of Jesus Christ. His atonement encompasses all of those cracks and makes it all whole, but you have to accept him and you have to see all of it for what it is and see that, kind of take that pride, that narcissism, like all those things out of you, and then just, be there. And everybody gets a doorknob, right? Like it's not just those that are the most gifted and those are the most beautiful and the most
everyone
talented.
is gifted in their own
Yeah.
way, and it's realizing that, and that every gift is necessary.
And the gospel of Jesus Christ is inclusive of everybody, right? It's that everyone in this house, in God's house, has a door, has a gift. Everyone contributes to this miracle and kind of this beauty that is there. So anyways, I love that. We happen
to live in a world that the world values some gifts more than others, but not God.
Yeah.
And not his purposes and his plan.
And that's the gift. It's like Mirabel at the beginning had no gift, but she was the giftless child. So that was actually the gift at the end of the day. She is that truth teller, the cycle breaker, the one who helped the family finally see itself. And for anyone that has been scapegoated, and I know many people in this community that have found us, just identifies, with that, what that role feels like. And it's not very fun, but I just want to applaud everyone too. It's a very important role, and that it is noble work. And very important work, and to just hang in there. I hope that we can be able to provide just strength and encouragement to keep going, to keep, talking about things, and not in a mean, heartless way. Do it out of love, and let the Spirit be your guide on how you do it. But you have the ability to then rebuild something really powerful, and we can heal what multiple generations have done out of protection, and survival. We can help, heal it in the true way. So
that's well said.
Anyways, any final thoughts on one of our favorite movies on family systems?
No, I think that you summed it up really well. Yeah, I mean, I guess the only thing I was just thinking, which is exactly what you basically said, is just, in order to be one and unified, everyone is an equal and valued and seen for who they really are, and not just because of their best gift, but like their whole person is embraced as a child of God. And that when we can do that to each other and get rid of the hierarchy of who's better than who, that's what is going to create a people of love, of a people of God, where his love can abide and help everyone be their best. And so we just see that more and more as time goes on. And we want to feel like we can help other people get there, and just, become one through Jesus Christ, and all feel the love of his embrace. And when you're a cycle breaker, it is so, so lonely. But I think at the end of the day, that's going to be the reward, is being able to be one with the Savior and everyone else who chooses him. And that just creates an equal value for everyone there.
All right. That's all we got for you.
Okay.
We'll cover Coco next.
Sean's other favorite Disney movie.
All right. See you guys.
Bye.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for enduring our deep dive into the movie Encanto. If it resonates with you, if you've been the one seeing the cracks, asking the honest questions, or trying to love your family without losing yourself, we hope that this conversation helps you feel a little bit less alone. And this is actually why a big part of why we wrote our new book, Christ-like Boundaries. And here it is for those of you that are watching on film. So many of you are trying to figure out how to be loving, faithful, forgiving, and honest without going back into unhealthy patterns that God may actually be helping them leave. And so this book is for the person who keeps wondering, am I being unchristlike if I need distance? Am I dishonoring my family if I tell the truth? Can I have boundaries and still follow Jesus? And our answer is a resounding yes. I'll put the link in the bio for the book. And also, if you'd like to just read the first chapter for free, we'll be able to do that also. But Christ-like love is not the same thing as unlimited access. Remember that. And sometimes the most faithful thing that you can do is learn how to love with wisdom, truth, and stewardship. And so that's all we have for you. I hope that you loved this episode, and there are more coming soon. I hope you all have a great night.